They schooled us in dancing. We're terrible compared to them.
But we were still like very like mixed
Yeah.
and like just like
really
integrated and like having a good time together.
One of their wants as a community was that they really wanted a women's volleyball league. Sports was always really important to me growing up and building community with my peers and other folks in my communities, and it transfers globally. These women, even though they already have like a very strong community unit and strong ties in their community, volleyball and sports will only make that stronger. I think these women work so hard and they just want what's best for their families, even though they live simpler lives and they live with very little. But part of living and thriving is having fun and enjoying yourselves and embracing recreation. And volleyball is a simpler sport and brings people together to do so.
I think what was interesting is I think that Mary Lynn first tried to get individual assets from the women, have them speak of what their strengths were. And they were very reluctant. They first wanted to communicate in terms of community, what they bring to the community as an asset. So that was done initially. And then we were able to get the women to speak individually about their strengths and the assets that they bring to the community. And I think what was really interesting, what came out of this mapping that was done that Mary Lynn facilitated, was they each had very unique strengths. So we did sort of like a spoked wheel to really visualize and help them visualize all the different assets that they bring. And it was fun, it was refreshing, it was interesting, it was this very open dialogue, this very, as if I was in a group of women here in America just talking about, okay, so what do we have the power to do? And you could almost see little lights turning on in their heads like, wow, we have all of these different strengths. And so that's yet to be determined in terms of how to bring this all together and what they can do within this Kenyan community with these strengths. But it's a start. It was the start of them and us visualizing and seeing how powerful as a group of women they really are.
International travel is so important for Vermont students in particular because we are in a bit of a bubble here, and especially within my studies, I feel like so much has been centered on like food systems and the environment within Vermont or within our country, and to be able to physically step outside of that and go somewhere completely different was really eye-opening and important for me to kind of change perspective.
For me, this trip really emphasized think globally, act locally. And as a Vermont student, it was interesting to work internationally and see, and it really opened my eyes. We're a world apart from, well, you think that we're a world apart from Vermont when we're in Kenya, but the amount of Western influence was eye-opening and also very shocking. But it also really reinforced the importance of their individual cultures and their individuality, and the importance of identifying other cultures and understanding and respecting other cultures. I would say this trip in 3 words was transformative, intentional, and empowering.
My experience on this trip were humbling, mutual, and community.
All right, let me pan over. Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Scene 2, take 4, action.
Oh! Do you want to do an audio thing?
I think because this trip was less of it wasn't as much for me as it was for other people, yet I did still grow. I experienced personal growth and learned a lot from the community. And I almost wonder if I maybe learned more from them than they might have learned from me.
For me, this trip was really a different, unique experience because it was really about community development. It was, as Olivia referred to earlier, it was so much more about other people than it was about our group. Although we spent an entire semester trying to develop projects and design ideas that we could implement when we were in Kenya, it was really the people that came to the table that we were working with that changed my thinking about going into projects and working with communities. It really was about the people in those communities. So for me, that was the biggest learning experience that I've ever been exposed to.
And our goal was to have a bike stand that could be both a blender and a charger for the phones. And we got the first one to work. The second one was a little questionable, which is the one that we worked on the ground. And so the overall goal of the project was to have some sort of entrepreneurial end goal where they could charge their own cell phones and not have to pay for it, or charge other people's cell phones and make money off of that, or repurpose the guavas that we then learned were going to be mangoes into, so they weren't just like, you put it really well, it's like apples falling off a tree. So they weren't just laying on the ground, they would repurpose those fruit that had fallen and turn those into some sort of product to sell as well, which we did learn that they're going to do a farm stand.
But if I go back to Kenya, it won't be as a vacation. It will be as a work trip to keep up those relationships that I made personally and as a group, and to check in on those schools and to learn more.
So it almost makes the bicycle generator obsolete in a couple of months in a way. Because if they're getting attached to the grid, why would you bike for an hour to charge your phone when you can actually plug it into the wall? Yeah. But it gave them an idea. I think it sparked an idea. So if I had to go there again, I would stay there longer so then we could work through that problem. We would have the generator, all right, maybe it'll become obsolete, but what's the next thing? And that's why I would like to stay there longer.
But going in, we kind of, we had to go through certain situations that people were saying that it could be really dangerous. And I heard this from my teachers, and I heard this from other professors and my family, who was nervous. But personally, I know we went to some dangerous areas, but I never felt like I was in danger because I felt so supported by the people around me. And they came in, and the first thing they said, we are blessed to have you here, and know that this is your home now, and we will do everything we can to keep you safe. And if you're hungry, we have food, and if you're thirsty, we have water. And they were just really welcoming.
And we sort of defined reciprocity to begin with as a situation where we are going to learn from them, we are there to learn with them, and we are there to teach them. So an all-around process and sharing of knowledge and experience and materials. So about 2-3 days into the trip, after we'd spent some time on the ground and been working together, I went to Dr. Kolodinsky and I said, look, I don't feel like there has been reciprocity. I really don't. I told her that I had been learning much more than I felt I had been teaching. Learning from the students, just from observing and listening to them, and seeing their routines, eating with them, and she listened to me, and I kind of expressed it as a concern because I really wanted there to be reciprocity. It was important to me, and she said, well, if you think about it like that on an individual basis, you also have to consider that they might also feel the same way. They might also feel like they've learned a lot from you today, emotionally, literally, and so that was kind of eye-opening to me, that everyone has their internal process when it comes to reciprocity, and you might always feel it's unbalanced. And she also challenged me to look at the big picture. So today I might have learned more than any given student at St. Charles Lwanga or than my classmates, but in the long run, if we establish these connections, there'll be solid reciprocity for everyone. If projects take off and actually create entrepreneurship, that'll be such a big change in their community. So in the long run, you have to think literally when it comes to reciprocity. In the short term, you have to remember that it might be more of an emotional experience or relational learning. And there might be an unbalance in the reciprocity there. So global citizenship, to me, means that we are all part of sort of an earthly citizenship. And citizenship is such an interesting topic because we are citizens of the United States. We're citizens of Vermont. We're citizens of Burlington. I'm a citizen of the south end of Burlington. So you can break it down to such a micro level, and then you can, and oftentimes that's how we think about it and define it. I'm from America. That's what we said to everyone when we went to Kenya. And so to take a step back and have an experience in Kenya where you have to work together as a community, where you're building relationships, it'd be really important to think of us all as global citizens. We belong to the planet, and we might have been born in different places, but we're here to do the same thing. We're here to help you build entrepreneurship. We're here to learn from you and with you. We want to hear your ideas, and just like you want to hear our ideas. And so to take the idea of global citizenship and apply it to community development, or apply it to just any trip that you're having abroad, and make sure that there's a feeling of mutual citizenship is important.
But as we developed those relationships and it became clear that we were all students, we were all passionate about learning, I remember at the last dinner that we had together, I was talking to one of the students about just random teenage low 20 things. They were saying we asked people, do you date at the school? And they were like, yeah, we have crushes on people, blah, blah, blah. And even little things like that, yeah, we date in college too. They were like, wow, that's amazing, whatever. It's I don't think that they really thought that, because we were from such different places, I don't think that they really put it together that we're the same people. But then one of them, Bruce, was talking to me, Maya, and his friend from the school, and he looked at his friend from the school and said, we're the exact same, it's just the color of our skin. And that is something that will always stand out to me, because I think that is one of the defining factors of us going there, was that we were white and they weren't. There was no white people there, which is I don't know how to say this without coming off as entitled or whatever, but we had never been on the flip side of it. So for them to say to us there's no difference between us but the color of our skin, it was just great to hear that they realized that even though we were these people coming in to we didn't want to look like the white savior, we were there to learn from them and they were going to learn from us, and there was no difference.
But finding the little things, the night that we had where we danced with the St. Charles the Longer kids, they all knew every word to Ed Sheeran's song Shape of You, and I was like, I also know every word to that song, and I just thought it was really fun that's just a little thing that we could share.
So I think the impact on international travel on Vermont students like ourselves is eye-opening, is how I choose to describe it, and it sort of redefines a lot of the concepts we've learned at UVM, but not just for college students, for any age student that's learning in Vermont. You get to kind of step out of the bubble that I like to define it as the bubble that we live in Vermont, and you get to find a new experience, and you get to see our community from the outside and build relationships with people that you otherwise would never meet in your life. And you sort of get to define your values as caring about those you'll never meet. And you might not meet everyone on that trip, but once you care about people you never thought you would meet, you'll start caring about everyone else as well.
I can kind of go off that. It's kind of like learning a new language. You can talk as much as you want in the classroom, and you can learn the formal and the informal, but the only way to really experience and become comfortable is to speaking the language, or being part of a community, is to really immerse yourself in it. And I feel that it's a lot about experiential learning.
But I'm so lucky I got into this class, because even in classroom I learned a little bit, but actually going out there into the world, I learned more than I ever did in a classroom setting. I think it's the human connections. In a classroom, you're almost more like a number sometimes. But when you actually have a one-on-one conversation with someone, that's where you can really learn what they're thinking, and it's that idea of coming together as a community. So there's more knowledge being transferred in those conversations. And there was multiple times where you had those one-on-ones with the community members.
At UVM in the Department of Development and Applied Economics, we learn a lot about the basis of community development and how that basis is citizen participation. If you don't have that, you're going to have trouble building trust, you're going to have trouble implementing your project, and you just won't have a good relationship. So one of the most intangible things, but really tangible in a sense that you're applying what you've learned so far, is actually building that trust with the community members we worked with in Rhody, and actually listening and answering their critical questions. You know, will this work? How well will it work? Can you put the generator somewhere else on the bike instead of the stand? Listening to those questions, answering them, and then at the end of the day, standing up. And one of them actually said this to me. They said, well, today it worked a little bit, but tomorrow we'll make it work better. And so that's one of the, in a sense, less tangible, but tangible things that you learn outside of a classroom and you don't learn until you actually get on the ground and do the work.
So to go into Kenya and already have some sort of trust built was a whole nother experience and really encouraging. So it was really cool to have Marilyn and Jane and everyone else know people already and really just get it, hit the ground running and be able to work in the projects in class was very cool. One of the things that I think we learned out of the classroom was to be very, very flexible. The very first day our power drill died, and that was the only thing we had been using in the United States to drill holes. So Izzy and I were kind of in the background while Jeff, Hannah, who's not here today, and Sam were working on building the initial stand with the community members, and we had a second stand that wasn't quite done. The power drill was broken. The only thing we had was a little baby screwdriver, the little bars of soap from the hotel, and some water. So we had to rub the screws in soap and water so that they became slippery enough to drill through the wood without breaking the wood, which we did, but we learned how to do it with very primitive materials. And I can say that that's something I never would have thought about doing had we not been there and had to really been creative with what we had at the hotels. That was hard.
Good job.
I would say educational, inspiring, and transformative for mine.
I would say that it was productive, emotional, and the third word would be reciprocity.
I think that my words would be moving, informational, and emotional, for sure.
I think my 3 words would be community, relationships, and I'm going to steal yours, inspiring.
I really hope that it gets put in there.
All right, so
I developed this really fast relationship with a guy over there, with Denzel, but he was just another student. And Marilyn, she was like, "How did you guys get so close so quickly?" She's like, I rarely see that happen to anyone. And I said, I think it was that I remembered his name immediately, and how important just like that initial, like the one piece of information someone else gives you, how important that is to like building relationships.
The last night that we were with a group of them, we had this huge dance party where they taught us all how to dance, and like we were all really, really bad at it. But they really enjoyed teaching us how to dance because it's such a big part of their culture. So I think that that was really neat to just break down any remaining barriers that we had and really just dance and kind of look like idiots. But it was a lot of fun because they just taught us, and it was a great way, I think, to really close our relationship with St. Charles Lwanga kids.
And one little footnote is that I've always been in the opinion, as I travel around the globe, that we learn more about ourselves than we do about others. And that it's about our own fabric and a reflection on who we are as a person and as a contributor to the globe.
So when we talk about community development, we talk about building relationships. And while many of the students might have thought that they were going to implement their projects in Kenya, the first step was building trust and relationships. And I would say that that really happened. Another word I would use to describe What I saw happening on the ground for both the Kenyan students, our Kenyan partners, and the UVM students was a word transformative. So hopefully our students will talk about the same things that we're anticipating here, that this experience was transformative for them as becoming community development professionals. So in September, 14 UVM students signed up for a class called Community Development and Education in Kenya. They met for 15 weeks planning their projects, of which these included public health. The other faculty member who went on this trip was Dr. Farrell Bertman. We shared the responsibilities as UVM faculty. One was technology, building a bicycle blender and cell phone charger. And the other project was a water project, and we had a volunteer who's an engineer from Otter Creek Engineering in Middlebury, and that was Pete DeGraff. So those were the 3 projects we started with, but we built on those. There was a women's empowerment group, and it turned out that there was a cultural group. And we worked with both a high school, St. Charles Lawanga, and an entire community that had a preschool in Rhody near Homa Bay, which is on Lake Victoria.
One of my goals was to do a needs assessment with the women of the village. I've been to their village twice, have met and connected with the matriarchs of the village as well as the young women. And I knew that they had much to say, but pretty much the needs had been established by the male population, and I wanted to be able to have the opportunity to sit and talk with them. So I built on the relationships that we had established and talked with them about their community needs as well as their personal strengths. So we did an asset map, and I was so fortunate to have 2 of the students spontaneously join my group with those women, and the women received us incredibly well. They had wonderful things to talk about, and although we'll talk about that later, one of the most inspiring things is they wanted to have a tournament for women to learn to play volleyball and football because they wanted their daughters to be able to have those skills as they grew older. It was very inspiring. Entrepreneurship was also something that they were very interested in and very focused on, and will be something that UVM will follow up with in our 3-year rollout of this project.
I'm Dr. Kenneth Hood, and I'm chair of the Vermont Center for International Learning Project. And it's my pleasure today to introduce Dr. Jane Kolodinsky on my right and Dr. Mary Lynn Riggs on my left. And the 2 of them have spent many, many hours formulating and carrying out this project in Kenya. And I think that it's been extraordinary, and I think that it will be a landmark project for others to copy in the future. The Vermont Center for International Learning Projects mission is to work with colleges and public schools to promote young people learning how to become better international citizens. And global citizenship, as we know, is a vital and important part of the growth and development of any youth today. And we're dedicated to that effort.
As chairperson of the Department of Community Development and Applied Economics, one of our mottos is we don't just study, we do. And this Kenya trip was a supreme example of giving students experience in the field with service learning. We partnered with Vermont Center for International Learning Projects as well as our partners in Kenya. We had a whole semester-long course with 14 students who were developing 3 or 4 different projects to hopefully implement on the ground in Kenya. And then we hit the ground running when we were there, and students had the opportunity not only to study about doing service learning, but actually to participate in an international context.
My role as project coordinator for this Vermont Center for International Learning Partnerships project with our partners at UVM was to prepare and develop the relationships and do with Jane the needs assessment with our partners to determine the kind of work that we would be doing. I visited Kenya twice before this trip and set up the arrangements for this kind of project. And together we developed the relationships that made this project work in a way that it was reciprocal. There was a clear understanding that the students in Kenya would offer our students as much as we hoped that we might be able to offer them. And so that notion of reciprocity was very, very important. We were very pleased with the outcome of this first trip. The students were incredibly well prepared. They were enthusiastic. They were inspiring. The relationships among the youth were something that we never dreamed could develop in the 12-day trip that we took. So all in all, it was just an incredibly beneficial trip, not only for our students from